Yesterday, I got a comment on a video that I posted about cutting my hair, and I've already turned my head a couple times to the side, so maybe you've noticed that my haircut's not like totally finished. I'm kind of still, I have some more that I noticed I need to cut off to make it more even, but that wasn't what the comment was about. The comment was using a transphobic slur, and I had heard that slur a couple times here and there on the internet, I think, and but I didn't know its source, and I didn't want to comment back, but I did want to share my thoughts about this term, and so I decided to just make a video. So trigger warning for transphobia, transphobic slurs, and anti-LGBTQ hate speech, and hate speech in general, I mean, is triggering for many people. So I'm gonna talk about the term that was used in the comment, and I'm going to share my thoughts. So the comment that was the term that was used in the comment was a sort of newer one to me, and that's trender. It's a hate term or slur that originated on alt-right subreddits like r/incel, r/ngtow, which stands for men go their own way, and basically subreddits that are populated by a lot of people who also populate 4chan, and I'll specifically say the alt-right parts of 4chan because there are other pages on 4chan, so I've heard. I don't have personal experience with that, but so this term kind of got popular on these subreddits, and another one r/the_Donald, and you can imagine which Donald they're referring to. It's not Donald Duck. It's for people who are like serious fans of Donald Trump. And GLAAD organization defines it as an anti-LGBTQ hate term. They have it defined on their website as part of their GLAAD Guide to Anti-LGBTQ Hate and Disinformation. If you don't know GLAAD, it used to stand for Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. I looked it up this morning and I didn't put it in my notes, so I'm pretty sure that's right, but they don't really identify with that specific moniker for the letters because it's not very inclusive of the whole queer community and LGBTQ community, but they do have a list of, it says, I'll quote their website specifically, the most prevalent and egregious terms, tropes, and concepts that are used to harass, attack, and spread malicious misinformation about LGBTQ people on social media. So they specifically have a glossary of hate terms and disinformation, which includes this term and other really hurtful terms that I have only learned recently. Oh my gosh, beans. Okay. Cat situation, totally taken care of. Right, so GLAAD has this to say about the term. This misguided, quote, this misguided and false trope claims that trans and or non-binary people are not really trans, but merely following modern trends of gender exploration for social or online capital. They also mentioned that it's, quote, intertwined with the hate-driven conspiracy theories of gender ideology. They have that in quotes on their website. And also, quote, social contagion, which falsely states that the trans experience is is a choice, and is consciously adopted from others rather than an innate experience and identity. So that speaks to a really common misconception that seeing representation of other trans people or being taught about gender identity and gender exploration influences or encourages people to be trans. It might encourage people to explore their identity, which is a good thing, because often people don't have the terms that describe their experience until they are learned until they're taught by other people or by representation. So they also kind of touch on that, because the definition on their website also goes on to quote the trans language primer. By the way, I'll link all of these sources in the description of my video. And it describes the definition that the trans language primer gives. That's not the word I'm thinking of, but the definition provided by the trans language divider primer as a thorough yet concise debunking, and then it quotes the trans language primer to say a derogatory term used most often by trans medicalists and TERFs, which are trans excluding radical feminists, aka transphobic people, to imply that certain people only identify as transgender because it is trendy. Often trans youth and non-binary people. That's why I wanted to talk about specifically transphobia against non-binary people, because this is a common term used to perpetuate verbal violence against transgender people who are non-binary. This is false. The rise in people identifying as trans is due to greater visibility, representation, and education that allows more people to learn about the language that describes their experiences earlier, and in places where that language hasn't been common before, or I would like to say where it hasn't been accessible before. So that gives you a little bit of a history of the term, and it gives you an idea of how, what mechanisms it uses to perpetuate violence against transphobic people in general, but especially non-binary transgender people. And I'll go on to say, because not all people who could be a victim of this term or be the target of this term are non-binary. Some may be exploring their identity, some may be gender fluid, some may be gender queer, some may be, I think some people identify as gender fuck, some people identify otherwise. So it's not just about non-binary people, it's not just about gender queer people, it's not just about trans people who do identify within the binary. They are also included, but basically something that I think about when I hear this term that really frustrates me is that if there's a trend of people exploring their gender identity and their gender expression, that is a wonderful thing. That should be celebrated, that should be encouraged. That's something that fills me with excitement and happiness for all of the people who get to heal through exploring their identity in a rich and nuanced way. Genders are socially constructed concepts. Since our society and societally constructed concepts are constantly in flux or changing, identifying with a gender is by definition a fluid experience, because genders themselves are fluid. They're constantly changing within the context of the cultural environment and the time period and just innumerable factors. So identifying with a gender, again, by definition, is a fluid experience, or with any genders. There will always be subtle fluctuations in traits that an individual perceives as denoting a certain gender, as well as subtle fluctuations in the gendered perception that other people have of an individual. Exploring your experience with identifying with the roles that we call genders is for everybody. Nobody should be denied that for any amount of time or for any reason. That's something that is a fundamental aspect of trans rights to me, and it's important to I realized that just now when I was looking at my notes that this is where I would want to make a note of explaining how trans rights are the lack or the denial of trans rights affects people differently based on the intersection of different traits that could cause them to be marginalized in different contexts, culturally, in their community, globally, in their family, etc., etc. Again, I could say innumerable factors. But again, I really want to emphasize that exploring, like, and I really want to say it specifically this way, because identifying with the roles that we call genders is a different experience for everybody, and exploring that, reflecting on that, and celebrating that, it should be available and accessible to everybody. The language around it should be accessible, the teaching around it, the support, the emotional support, the education around that experience and opportunity of introspection, that should be available to everybody. And denying that to anybody for any reason is wrong. It doesn't matter if somebody is going to experiment with identifying or expressing their gender a certain way and then change it later. That's a valid experience. It should be a completely valid choice. There's nothing harmful about that, and so it should be encouraged to explore gender experience, gender identity, the history of gender, the education of it. It should be encouraged. And let's see, I do say here, it should be widely accepted for people to freely explore their gender without commitment or restriction, intersectionally across all marginalized groups. And yeah, it just makes me wonder, why are we trying to force people into boxes created by an illusion of binary body types? Sometimes I even like to think of it in terms of, like, why do we want to force people to reveal information about their genitals to us as strangers? but I, at the end of the day, really wanted to discuss this transphobic slur that I wouldn't have even called it that. I wouldn't have called it a slur or a hate term until I did research about it. So I'm really glad that I had the desire to make a video about that comment that somebody left. And honestly, I was gonna delete it, but a few people replied to it with really like great things to say, and that made me so happy that I wanted to leave it. Obviously, I don't want anyone in this video to add any responses to that person's comment, or to like in any way like go look at their like channel or profile or anything like that. But I don't even think it was a person. I think it was probably a robot. I think it was a bot. But again, I'm just glad that it inspired me to make this video, and I hope that it inspired you to watch this video. So yeah.